This is a shared understanding as it evolved through this process. When we set out to make this loop, we were not aiming to capture everything. And any system thinking exercise never tries to model the everything. It's definitely a big picture understanding of the factors shaping ecological restoration. So not going too deep into any particular aspect of ecological restoration. It is a work in progress. So it is still evolving. The understanding is building as we are sharing it with people. Policies which favor quick results are being favored, which is leading to more funding, more support to monocrop plantations, which are usually faster growing species, which are chosen without the kind of scientific rigor that goes into ecological restoration. We keep reading about these tree plantation drives, and so many hectares of land or so many saplings have been planted. There is a perceived pressure to achieve the targets fast. As industries and infrastructure projects are getting sanctioned at a great speed, it's leading to more and more quick fix plantations, sometimes very, very far removed from the actual place of development. And quick fix plantations, in turn, give a kind of a green chit to these infrastructure projects because, in principle, the green cover that is lost is compensated for. Very important to demarcate here that area under restoration and green cover are very, very different things. There's no one person to blame. It's rather the way this whole system is organized around these various loops is leading to these kind of outcomes. We're all part of the system. So we need to work with everyone in the system by doing ecological restoration the right way, choosing species which are native to the landscapes, choosing the right places to plant, the right times, doing it following the scientific protocol, involving communities. Awareness around ER is also growing over time. This is a slow process. Awareness grows. People hear about it. They get curious. They test out. They do some pilots. As it develops, the availability of knowledge and resources around ecological restoration itself grows over time through various efforts of people and organizations who have been doing it, testing, learning from what they're doing. And then this database of knowledge and resources has been increasing over time as well.
I think to start with, I wanted to set a bit of context as to why we thought this was an important exercise and where we are with it. So when we thought about, as the alliances, as these desks came on board for ERA to take on different kinds of initiatives, whether it was from policy, whether it was from capacity building, or even knowledge and outreach, or making films on restoration. And like that, there are about 8 odd desks that now we have at the Alliance. And one part, of course, was the idea was, can we see what are the real gaps that are there that we could address? And one way to identify the gaps was to try and see that if we have to look at it as a system as a whole, right? So what are all the influences that are coming on ecological restoration at this point? What is the system that it currently resides in? And what are the changes that we need to make so that ecological restoration can become a more dominant practice? Right? So this is where we thought that instead of like it is time to kind of pull in and move beyond move beyond from our work in silos, but really see what are the relationships that exist between our work within ERA, outside of the Alliance, with other organizations and other sectors altogether, right? Because if we have to create some kind of change in terms of the way we do ecological restoration or what is considered ecological restoration, right? So it might be better for us to now take on this kind of an approach where we pool in our ideas, our thoughts, and figure out who's doing what, where, and then seek support, seek allyship, or seek partnership with the others, and find ways to kind of work with each other on these things. And it was with this intent that we had this workshop that was done, which was led by Desta. And this was more of a participatory approach where we had just the steering committee members and some people on the desks. But the usefulness of this exercise, we felt, is beyond just the work that ERA is doing, but also how do we all see ourselves fitting into the larger ecosystem. Given this, I think I would like to introduce our speaker, So we have Kabir Sharma, who works with DESTA. He's also the founding director of DESTA. And Kabir is a researcher who applies systems thinking and modeling to co-create insights on sustainability and development challenges. He's the founder director of DESTA, which I've just mentioned. He's a which is a methods firm specializing in applied systems thinking. And DESTA partners with organizations for collaborative research and strategy development using participatory models and interactive simulations. Um, Previously, Kabir has also held research positions in the domains of energy policy, climate change, and social ecological systems with institutes in India and Europe, and carried out field work on education and public accountability in rural India. He holds a master's degree in physics and engineering from the universities of Paris and Delhi. So with this, I would like to invite Kabir, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this webinar, and I would like to hand it over to you. So thank you, Kabir, and over to you now.
Thanks very much, Arjun, for that context setting and a very nice introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Kabir. As Arjun mentioned, I work with DESTA Research. We are a methods firm. We apply systems thinking and modeling with partners on sustainability and climate change related challenges. All right. So what I would like to share with you this afternoon is Arjun mentioned some outcomes based on a participatory systems thinking process, which we undertook with ERA. And I'll present a systems view of ecological restoration in India. I'm also joined by Karthik from DESTA. We'll also join in towards the end of the session. I'll just, in terms of an overview, I'll take you through, the overall objectives which we set out with for this exercise that Arjun was describing, how we went about doing it. I'll give you a presentation where I'll unpack the systems map which we developed through the exercise. One second, I'm just having a problem with it. And I'll share some reflections on the systems map from a systems thinking perspective. Then we'll also open up a Kumu map. Kumu is this open source software for systems thinking. So we'll also be opening up the map for the, for all of you and the entire ecological restoration community to also view the map and add on to it. And we'll have a Q&A at the end. So just, yeah, okay. Overall objectives that we set out with were as a collective between ecological the ERA Alliance, creating a shared systems view of ecological restoration in India, unpacking why certain trends are emerging around ecological restoration. So why certain things are happening the way they're happening, why other trends are not emerging in the system, situating where the work of the ERA is placed within the system, and collectively thinking through possibilities and needs going forward, using the map as a tool for building a shared understanding and thinking about the future. So the way we did this was through a participatory process. We had a couple of workshops with the ERA, and one was on capacity building, and then we applied the tools where we met at the Keystone Foundation office at Kotagiri. And we had a really wonderful workshop there with ERA steering committee and the desks who were present, where we actually used the tools and applied them and built out the map, which I'll be also unpacking shortly. So I'm talking about certain trends which are emerging in ecological restoration. What I mean is, certain over time patterns which we see emerging around ecological restoration. And we mapped out a few of these to start out and contextualize the process. I'm just showing you as a visual tour of the workshop how we did it, a few of the indicators that we mapped out. So we see here, there's area under plantation. which is these largely monocrop based plantations, which has been seeing a huge increase over time. And if this is where we are today in 2025, these plantations are really growing at a fast rate. Vis-a-vis that, the area restored with ecologically sensitive lens, the kind of lens that ERA stands for, has been growing at a much slower pace. Although there has been some growth there, but it has been growing at a much slower pace. The number of practitioners around ecological restoration, some types of stakeholders have been increasing over time, but then others has been mostly stagnant. So that's another trend that is there. The accessibility around knowledge and resources for ecological restoration has been growing over time as well, with more growth in recent years. And then, of course, we have the native nurseries, which are essential for doing ecological restoration, which have also been, steadily, very slowly seeing some kind of growth. But there's a big difference in the kind and the scale of growth which we see happening around certain kinds of restoration or plantations vis-a-vis the kind of ecological restoration that is enshrined in the preamble that the ERA stands with. So these were some of the trends or some of the indicators which we wanted to unpack why things are happening the way they're happening. And we, of course, mapped out many more, but I'm aware we have a very little short duration today. I will not be able to take you through everything. Now, when we use systems thinking, we use this analogy of an iceberg to contextualize the work we do. And you are all familiar with icebergs, and we see only 5 to 10% above the surface of water, and there's a whole 95% underwater, which is invisible. So that is the analogy we use to use applied tools of systems thinking to start unpacking why things are happening the way they're happening. And we use different kinds of tools for different as we unpack this. So events are what we see happening around us. Below that, we have patterns of behavior, which are trends over time, like the ones I showed you. So that's what we're seeing happening over time. And below that, we have system structure, which is essentially, how different parts of the system, these could be different agents in the system, different policies, different incentives, rules, regulations, aspirations of people, different kinds of factors which influence the system, how they link with each other. What are the cause and effect relationships that are there in the system, which are actually giving rise to, the patterns of behavior and the outcomes we see happening around us in any system. And even below that, we have what we call mental models, which is essentially, people in the system, what values, assumptions, beliefs that they have about the system, which give rise to these structures, the way things are linked with each other, which eventually gives rise to patterns and events. We don't have much time. There's a lot to unpack in the iceberg, but I just wanted to show it to you, as this is the kind of approach which we use in systems thinking to go deeper and deeper. But there's a lot more to unpack here, which maybe we can skip for now. So at the structure level, I showed you some of the patterns, and then we used a applied systems thinking process where we facilitated, we broke out into group work and with the members, and the participants themselves started mapping out, what are the causes and effects between parts of the system, between policies, between infrastructure and industries, between funding, jobs, various things in the system. You'll see, you won't be able to read very well here, but there are various kinds of parts of the system which are linked through these causes and effects. We converted them into what we call a causal loop diagram, which is a tool we use in systems thinking to make sense of how these causes and effects relate to each other, feedback loops that emerge. So the team, the groups themselves started building out these causal loop diagrams and trying to unpack these forces in the system, which we then later synthesized into an overall, shared a kind of a map. And then we had iterations both at the workshop And then also after that, we've had a few rounds of refinement and things. And I'll be unpacking that shared understanding, which is an evolving piece, given this huge scale of system that we're talking about. So I'll come to that in a minute, and we'll be unpacking the systems map as a causal loop diagram. And I'll be talking about what a causal loop diagram is as I present it to you. It's important that this is, a shared understanding that I'll be presenting to you. As it evolved through this process, it does not aim to capture everything. So rather only some essential feedback loops, some essential parts of the or forces in the system, which are actually driving the dominant behavior which we see emerging as of today. So it's really aiming at slicing and dicing the complexity. So we have just some of the elements there, certainly not everything that is around ecological restoration. It's definitely a big picture understanding of the factors shaping ecological restoration. So not going too deep into any particular aspect of ecological restoration, but giving an overview of the system, and that's what we were aiming for. It is a work in progress. So it is still evolving. The understanding is building as we are sharing it with people. And even today, we'll be opening it up to you all and the larger community as a Kumu map. So it's definitely an evolving piece of an evolving map, and the understanding is growing. So coming to the map itself, I'll start unpacking it here. And we'll use this a little bit of semantics of causal loop diagrams. It's on the top right here. You'll see variables that are there in the system. I'll unpack them gradually. You'll see them connected with links. You'll see S's and O's on the links. So where you see an S, it stands for similar direction, causality. And where you see an O, it means opposite. Similar means cause and effect moves in the same direction. If the cause goes up, the effect goes up. If the cause goes down, the effect also goes down. And opposite is the cause and effect move in opposite directions. So if the cause goes up, A goes up, B goes down, or if B goes down, A goes up, basically. You'll see some reinforcing and balancing loops. I'll talk about it as we get to it. Now, starting out to unpack the system over here. So essentially, over the last 20, 25 years, there's been increased awareness and understanding around climate change, how it is impacting our ecosystems, our lives, land degradation that's happening. And at the global level, there have been various targets that have been set for restoration, such as the Bond Challenge, and then India's commitments to the UNFCCC on how much carbon sequestration India will strive to achieve, how much area under forest, etc. So there are various targets that have been set. So you see an S here. So the growing, climate change and land degradation, the growing awareness of climate change has led to targets on restoration, higher targets on restoration. And compared to what the area under restoration is at the moment in India, there is a gap. So there's a gap between what the target is and what is the current state of the system, area under restoration. And that gives rise to a gap, which needs to be filled through various actions, right? So from this gap now, one way to fill the gap is by doing ecological restoration the right way. The way that ERA also talks about choosing species which are native to the landscapes, choosing the right places to plant, the right times, doing it following the scientific protocol, involving communities. So doing ecological restoration in that manner is one way to fill the gap, which over time leads to more ecologically restored area, which leads to more area under restoration, which ultimately closes the gap. So you see an O here. So this is what we call a balancing loop. And balancing loops are essentially goal-seeking loops. So they're always trying to seek some goal. So here the goal being the targets on restoration, which results in this gap. And then one way to close it is by doing ecological restoration. Now, we see here, there is this sign and those parallel lines. This stands for a significant time delay. So ecological restoration is not a fast process. Both, the developing an understanding of the landscape, of the species that are suitable, of the protocols which should be followed takes time. But then also the physical process of growth of these species is not, is sometimes slow compared to other kinds of species. So it is a time consuming, it does have a time delay in it. And that is demarcated here with this delay sign. So this link has a significantly longer delay compared to others. Now this gap exists and there is a time delay here. There is a perceived pressure, let's say, to achieve the targets fast. There are these targets, there's a gap, there's some perceived pressure to achieve targets fast, which has led to a paradigm where, policies which favor quicker results are being favored. So you have more policies which favor quick results, which is leading to more funding, more support to quick plantations. So these kind of monocrop plantations, largely, which are usually faster growing species, which are chosen without the kind of scientific rigor that goes into ecological restoration. These are there's a kind of a blanket approach that we use. We choose species based on how fast they are growing, whether they be native or non-native, and we talk about planting them in various kinds of locations. Sometimes those are suitable, sometimes those are not suitable locations, but these are faster growing. They promise to give quicker results. So there is a lot of funding and support going towards these quick plantations. We can call them quick fix plantations because they're essentially looking to fix the problem quickly. So it's led to a lot of these quick fix plantations growing, which I showed you in the first graph. You saw plantations picking up exponentially, and these they give some kind of quick results in terms of how many acres of land has been planted up. We keep reading about these tree plantation drives, happening all across, and so many hectares of land or so many saplings have been planted. There's quick results. It gives rise to increased green cover, and at a in some kind of notional way, this particular process, B2, let's call it balancing loop B2, is also closing the gap. So we have two processes here which are competing or are very different from each other, but both are being used to close this gap. And very important to demarcate here that area under restoration and green cover are very, very different things. You have joining a ERA webinar. I'm sure you are all very, very well aware of this. But the kind of ecological, the kind of ecological benefits and co-benefits, increases in biodiversity, increases in species, a whole lot of second and third order positive consequences of ecological restoration, which happen through B1, are entirely absent in B2, as these are, a very not very diverse, very monoculture kind of plantations, and their ecological relevance is quite limited. Nonetheless, they are being used to close the gap and meet the targets, and to meet our climate change mitigation and climate resilience and reversing land degradation kind of goals. Now, we have another dynamic here, which is, as more and more industrial and infrastructure development projects are coming in, they are required to do compensatory afforestation as per the mandates. And typically, most of these plantations are also following this kind of a paradigm of quick fixes because you want it to happen very fast. So quick fix plantations, as industries and infrastructure projects are getting sanctioned at a great speed, it's leading to more and more quick fix plantations. And quick fix plantations in turn give a kind of a green chit to these infrastructure projects, because in principle, the green cover that is lost is compensated for. So what we have here is a different kind of a loop. It's called a reinforcing loop. And these amplify change in any direction, in any one direction. So as there are more plantations, it gives more green chit to having this kind of development. And that kind of development then again supports these kind of plantations in other locations, sometimes very, very far removed from the actual place of development. And this kind of behavior reinforces each other, and we see a kind of reinforcing growth both in plantations and in this kind of development. And we see over time that these policies which favor quick results, both in terms of development and in terms of meeting these targets, are getting reinforced by this kind of a process. And policies which favor quick results are getting reinforced through the same, and that continues to provide funding for these kind of plantations. These plantations grow, which allows this kind of development to take place, and then you have reinforcement of the same kind of policies. So we have three coupled reinforcing loops, R1, R2, and R3, which are really driving the system right now and making B2 a very, very dominant force in the system. And the whole juggernaut is working in these three reinforcing loops, and making B2 much, much more dominant than B1, which we also see reflected in some of the patterns over time that I was showing you initially. At the same time, as these quick results start coming, results of success, we have done certain amount of plantation. There is media reporting that takes place around plantations, and which is leading to more and more awareness amongst the public that plantations are one of the great solutions to meet our climate and land degradation challenges. It can be said that this is a misinformed awareness, but it's leading to a preference amongst different stakeholders in the system, a preference towards quick plantations over restoration, because these promise quick results. The results are being shown, and this awareness kind of loop leads to a media reporting, awareness generation amongst the public, as well as various stakeholders in the system. This preference developing, leading to more quick fix plantations and more land under plantation, which leads to more and more media reporting and more of this same happening. So that's another reinforcing loop that's taking place, which is further strengthening the system towards B2, and making this a much more dominant kind of mechanism to achieve the targets. While this is true, on the ground, we do see a lot of organizations, individuals who are involved in ecological restoration in a very serious way. All across the country, we are scattered in different places. And ecological restored area has been growing because of these efforts of people, which is leading to some amount of media reporting about ecological restoration, or ER, as I've written it for short. And awareness around ER is also growing over time, although much, much more slowly compared to the scale of pace of things in this part of the system. This is also growing at a much slower rate. And this leads to more practitioners, organizations who have been getting interested in ecological restoration. And more practitioners joining means more ecological restoration, more land can be restored this way, which leads to more ecologically restored area. And slowly, this reinforcing loop R5 is also active in the system at a much slower pace. And you see another time delay here, which shows how this is a slow process. Awareness grows, people hear about it, they get curious, they test out, they do some pilots. Slowly, more and more people are getting to know about it and doing more of it. As more people join, more practitioners, organizations come in, it leads to more awareness about ecological restoration, which feeds into word of mouth and ripple effects, and more people come in to know about this. And that is a reinforcing loop, R6, around awareness growing and more practitioners and organizations also coming in. This also means a lot more jobs in restoration. So as organizations increase, as more people get interested, there are more opportunities for people to join, and more jobs in restoration also come up. And as more jobs come up, also, of course, more people are interested in what is this ecological restoration all about. And there are more people who come in, more organizations picking up this. So you have a reinforcing loop R7, between jobs and practitioners on ground who are doing it, who are doing ecological restoration on ground. At the same time, as more and more restoration takes place, it leads to, and along with efforts such as that of ERA on collecting and making sense of all this rich information and data from real practice on ground, as it develops, the availability of knowledge and resources around ecological restoration itself grows over time. And this was not very high some years ago, as some of those previous graphs were showing, but this has been increasing over time through various efforts of people and organizations who have been doing it, testing, learning from what they're doing, and then this database of knowledge and resources has been increasing over time as well. So that's a reinforcing loop R8. Sure enough, as we do more and more ecological restoration, as more and more of it happens across the country, there's more demand for native plants. So you need to have native saplings and seedlings to do ecological restoration. And not all nurseries typically keep them. A lot of the nurseries are keeping exotic species. So, but the demand for native plants slowly is also growing, which means, which has led to native plant nurseries also showing some kind of a steady, very slow, but some kind of a growth over time. So these nurseries keeping native plants has also grown across the country. And as these native plant nurseries grow, they have, and as they are growing seedlings and saplings, they're learning so much about them. And that adds to the availability of, knowledge and resources around ecological restoration. And one example that comes to my mind is the seed germination protocol database that ERA came up with recently, where, these nurseries are pooling in their learnings into a shared resource for others to use. So availability of knowledge and resources around ecological restoration also grows as these nurseries grow, which feeds into more effective, more scientific, better, long-lasting, sustainable ecological restoration to happen as well. So we have these reinforcing loop R9 as well, supporting ecological restoration. Now, zooming out a bit, conservation and preservation of existing ecosystems also leads to a lot of knowledge and resources about ecological restoration, which can be used to do more effective ecological restoration. And ecological restoration itself also includes, trying to conserve and preserve what already is there. So there is a link between ecological restoration and conservation and preservation. And these also reinforce each other. So there is this reinforcing loop R10, which is also, an important piece as you zoom out from just restoration. As more and more restoration has been happening, the funding for restoration has also been increasing. Of course, the scale of things here is much smaller than what we have on this side, but funding for restoration has been growing over time, which has allowed more organizations, practitioners to come and do ecological restoration, which leads to more awareness and more funding for restoration over time. So we have a reinforcing loop here, R11, which is also slowly trying to, which has also been growing and increasing funding towards restoration. Now, as awareness towards restoration increases, the misinformed awareness, it counters some of the misinformed awareness that exists out there on plantations being the silver bullet solution to addressing climate change. The awareness, as awareness grows around ecological restoration and its benefits, it starts countering some of this misinformed awareness in the system. And slowly it is countering that preference for quick plantations over restoration. So as awareness of restoration grows, misinformed awareness starts coming down, which means the preference for quick plantations over restoration starts coming down, which means that funding for restoration starts going up, because funders also take notice of this. And as more funding for restoration comes in, it allows more practitioners and organizations to take up ecological restoration, more awareness around ecological restoration, more media reporting, which starts to counter this misinformed awareness through reinforcing loop R12. So this is a reinforcing loop which is trying to counter some of that media coverage around plantations that has grown over time. Of course, these loops are still not dominant in the system. As I was saying, the dominant loops are definitely on the left side, but these loops do exist, and they are slowly building up in momentum. Now, this whole paradigm of quick results, quick fix plantations, and favoring quick results often leads to the loss of community rights, the distancing of communities from their native ecosystems, from their native natural environments, as well as reduces the participation that communities have in decision making around their ecological resources. Because that fundamentally takes time, that requires involvement, and this kind of paradigm is not very well suited to it. So we often see communities getting disenfranchised of rights, the participation falling, which we often see as this happens, as the communities are distanced and uprooted and displaced. It often leads to negative consequences on conservation and preservation of the ecosystems that they were living in or living within. So that's another consequence of this kind of these R1, R2, R3, which has been manifesting over time. Now, as awareness around restoration has grown, organizations which don't directly work on restoration, but maybe work on allied areas, livelihood improvement, agricultural development, working on allied adjacent sectors, such as livelihood organizations, have started taking note of ecological restoration and the potential benefits or the potential synergies that could be there between restoration and the work that they're doing, which is sure enough led to, or I mean, some of these loops are in a very, very nascent stage, but they are there in the system, leading to more jobs around restoration, for sure, but also much more ecological restoration itself. Because if ecological restoration is also being done, could also be done to meet some of the livelihood related goals that could be there around income enhancement of communities, livelihood improvement, diversification of livelihoods, then sure enough, the uptake of ecological restoration would be much higher. It also means a lot more engagement with the community. So restoration by livelihood organizations, because they work intrinsically very closely with communities, as that has been picking up, the engagement with the community also comes into account, which leads to much more ecological restoration, because it's only when the community sees value in the ecological restoration, and only when the community is involved is the ecological restoration in and around their lands likely to be long-term sustained restoration, and they have to be integral and central to that process. So this forms a channel for engaging more and more with communities on the ground on ecological restoration and livelihoods. This also can lead to this engagement with communities can also lead to a lot more of their participation in the processes of both of restoration and preservation of existing ecosystems. And sometimes it can also lead to giving some pushback to these to some of the policies, side effects of policies that come onto them in terms of getting some of their rights and increasing their participation in the decision making around in and around their livelihoods, as well as ecological restoration, which they are a part of. Now, that is some of the loops. Now, one very important thing to highlight here is, although, so we see now, we saw these reinforcing loops R13 and R15. Now we see one reinforcing loop R16, which is of a very different nature. So these dominant paradigm of quick fix plantations actually don't have very high succession and survival rates What that means is when these plantations are, when the seedlings and saplings are planted, according to some studies, almost 50% of them don't make it to becoming full-grown trees or full-grown species at all. There is a very, very high failure rate that happens simply because these species are often not chosen in sync with the place which they are, where the geography that they're planted in, or they're planted in unsuitable locations. There is no community participation, so the community also doesn't support it. So for various reasons, the succession and survival of these plantations and this method of doing plantations is very poor. And so if you have a plantation on a 100-hectare plot, you cannot expect 100 hectare of green cover to come up. It might be as little as 50% or 40% of that. So what we have here is this quick fix, which was being used, to meet the target, actually has a backfire. So what we see is, as these plantations go up, these quick results go up, the succession and survival actually goes down, which means that after a time delay, the green cover actually goes down. And the green cover goes down, that means the gap goes up. So the gap has gone up, say 15, 20 years down the line. If you monitor these plantations, a lot of them would not have survived. So it's actually, there's a big gap between what we thought would have been the case of green cover and the actual outcomes, which means that the gap is again created. And I'm just highlighting that part of the loop now. So that means this gap is actually can grow over time. And then the question comes, how do we respond to it? Do we respond to it using the same fixed kind of method, where we put in more plantations, more quick plantations to fill in the gap? Or do we talk about thinking about shifting fundamentally to ecological restoration, which might be the only way to fundamentally do restoration in a way which is long-term, sustainable, and does not lead to these kind of side effects coming in? So we have a quick fix that backfires archetype in systems thinking. And what we see here is precisely that, where there is a fix that is applied, which in the short term definitely closes the gap. We see green cover, we see results in terms of how much land is planted, the media starts reporting about it. Green cover is supposed to increase over time, but in the short term it's meeting the goal, but in the long term the succession and survival is quite bad, which leads to green cover coming down over time and leads to unintended consequences, which actually mean the entire process is backfiring over time, and which can lead to, depending on how aware we are of this and how much action is taken on it, can lead to more and more of the same being done, which will lead to more and more of the same which also means a lot of resources and are getting wasted in doing this kind of process, in terms of money, in terms of even water, because these plantations take a lot of water to survive, as they're not very suitable to the local ecosystems. So there is a quick fix which is backfiring, and that's what's one big systems from systems perspective, one archetype which is emerging in the system is a quick fix that's backfiring. And it comes down to how we choose to then respond and fill in that gap. So we see here the whole system I've unpacked for you, loop by loop. We have these two balancing loops, which are two fundamentally different ways of achieving this target, this goal, and they are being, one of them has become much more dominant because of the reasons I was saying. So B2 and this part of the system is way more dominant right now, but this backfire piece is there in the system, which probably has not been highlighted to the extent in the media and other places. Then we have these reinforcing loops all around them, which are reinforcing either B1 or B2. And the ones that are supporting B1 are right now not dominant, while the ones which are, pushing B2 are the ones which are dominant in the system right now. And that is an overview of the kind of forces, some of the forces which are there in the system, not capturing everything, but an overview of some of the most important factors which are interlinked with each other. Stakeholders are located, as you can imagine, they are placed all over this map. We have so many stakeholders in the system which are sitting in, pushing and pulling the system in different directions, which is giving rise to the outcomes we are seeing. So we have media, which is reporting in different ways around B1 and B2. We have organizations engaging on ecological restoration on the ground, doing ecological restoration. We have the adjacent organizations which are doing allied activities, which like livelihood organizations. We have the community, the community stakeholders, which are part of this system. We have the governance institutions, the community governance institutions. We have policy makers, all and the entire various. So these are buckets of stakeholders. They are like multiple stakeholders inside each of these, but they are policy stakeholders which are influencing the system both in terms of the targets, the international level, as well as the domestic, policy, various kinds of agents in the policy space. You have the private sector stakeholders, both in terms of the development as well as the quick fix plantations and the funding that is going around. So you have these various stakeholders, which are all influencing the system towards, in different ways as these loops unpack. And they're all sitting and trying to move these loops up and down based on their own priorities. So some quick systemic reflections on this piece before I go ahead. So these are the processes that are driving the system. We see competing loops, and we also see dominant loops. Some of the loops are way more dominant over others. We see common archetypes which are emerging, quick fixes that backfire, as well as success to the successful. So some of these loops are more, success is also in quotes, because certain kind of loops are being projected as being successful, and more success is coming to more and more of those loops are happening over time on the left side of the system. We say in systems thinking that a system has the perfect design to produce the outcomes it is presently producing. So the outcomes that are coming out of a system is because of the way these cause and effect relationships are in the system, the way that these agents are pushing and pulling the system. So with that, with those dominant loops, the outcomes we see are, that system is perfectly designed to produce what it is producing. The outcomes might not be perfect, but it is because that system is a particular way. And it is only by changing the loops or the forces which are dominant can the outcomes we see be changed. So it's only if we change which loops are dominant in the system can these outcomes be changed. And the outcomes we see over time are, as I was saying, these area under plantations growing at a much faster rate, area restored with an ecologically sensitive lens. As we look back, say from 2000 to current, has been growing at a much slower rate. And these scales are not even on the same. This is like an order of magnitude higher, the scale on this graph. But this is what we have been seeing. And what we would like to see is ecological restoration, becoming much more dominant in the system because of all the various long-term benefits which are only possible through ecological restoration. And sure enough, the area under plantations would need to come down to make way and make space for ecological restoration to pick up. So outcomes we would like to see into the future would be, some version of these graphs. How we can go about them is by working with the system, changing what is dominant in the system, and working through that, through the loops. So what I'll do is very quickly, I'll talk about some of the reflections that we also had in the workshop around how outcomes in how interventions and how outcomes in the system could be changed. But this is still work in progress, just some things, and it is just some starting fuel. So what we see right now, as I was saying, is we have these presently dominant loops, and they are highlighted here: R1, R2, R3, R4, B2. These are the ones which are the most dominant in the system at the moment. So how do we, intervene, and how do we change what's emerging in the system? So one is strengthening the loops which enable better ecological restoration, which is a very central part of also what ERA is doing and others are doing, which is around, improving the media reporting around ecological restoration, working with journalists, creating more awareness about ecological restoration through R6, creating better jobs in restoration through R7, creating better research and database around knowledge and resources, R8, enabling more nurseries to take up native plants so that there are no bottlenecks as it is scaled up. So strengthening the loops, enabling B1, which are these R5, R6, R7, R8, and R9. That is one important piece when engaging with the system and trying to change which loops are dominant. Another one that I was mentioning also, and it came up, was strengthening the work with restoration adjacent organizations. So organizations not directly working just on restoration, but these livelihood-based organizations and others who are in adjacent sectors, which could strengthen reinforcing loop 13 and 15 by increasing the engagement with the community, and in having more participation from the community, which could have a lot of also lead to a lot more uptake of ecological restoration. Strengthening loops which are countering the dominant loops directly. So there are these two loops, R12, which is directly trying to counter this misinformed awareness, which needs to be strengthened. So R12 through countering misinformed awareness and the preference to on quick plantations, that needs to be strengthened through work, as well as the work with the community, which is also facing the side effect of the dominant paradigm, and engaging with the community through various channels can improve and increase outcomes around restoration as well. The third point is, influencing how we measure success. So right now, success is being measured by the short-term results, how many acres has been planted and things. But as I was saying, the succession and survival is poor. So how can the metrics of success be rethought of, be made more scientific, and be made more long-term, so that we are measuring success not in a 1-year time frame, but in at least a 5, 10, 20-year time frame, because we're talking about climate change, which is, and carbon sequestration. And these plantations will only, even from a carbon sequestration lens, they will only sequester carbon if they become mature trees. And we're not even getting there, then what is this metric of success might need to be rethought of. Evolving ways to engage meaningfully with the dominant system. So as I was saying, there's a lot of momentum in this part of the loop. It's really working at a different scale altogether. So can we think of ways of engaging meaningfully with that part of the system as well, while we also work on our strengths and our parts of the system over here? We also need to think of ways of engaging meaningfully with these quick fix plantation system. And one thought which was there is, right now, this compensatory afforestation that is done is largely being done through these quick fix plantations. But what if by making this information around success metrics and succession and survival, if that is made more and more known, perhaps in future, this link could be broken, and maybe every time industries and infrastructure projects come up, they are mandated to do ecological restoration. So this link, instead of going to quick fix plantations, comes to ecologically restored area, which could, of course, unlock a land, huge kind of windfall changes for ecological restoration in the country by weakening this loop and probably reconfiguring the system in some way, thinking of ways to do that. And then new loops or links which can be added or strengthened in the system. Just a thought here, can we think of new measures and understandings of value? So the value of ecological restoration goes beyond just, climate change and land degradation and carbon sequestration, there are so many other second and third order benefits and that come out of ecological restoration, such as the biodiversity, and which can have links to agricultural productivity in adjacent lands, can improve that. And also these could be more cultural, more aesthetic values. So new measures of and understandings of value from ecological restoration, which importantly should be valued by stakeholders in the system. So if the farmers or the landowners or other people start valuing, or any stakeholder, it could be private sector, if those values, if that if those new measures get valued by people in the system, then the loop becomes endogenous. The loop gets closed, and you could have a new reinforcing loop, say R17, where ecologically restored area leads to new measures of value, which are valued by practitioners, leading to more practitioners, more ecological restoration happening over time. And it could shift and bring in some shifts of the narrative and the outcomes which we are seeing around the system. So those are some thoughts around from a systems thinking perspective. That is the major chunk of the systems thinking that I wanted to share with you. But we are all part of the system. So I showed you the various stakeholders which are influencing the system. But all of us on the call, as people interested in ecological restoration, we are all also part of the system. We are not outside it. So where are we located in the system? Which loops, which links are we engaged with? Where are we located? How do our actions influence the system? That's a question. And how do they relate with each other? So how does, we might be experts in a particular part of restoration, somebody might be an expert in invasive, somebody might be an expert in something else, but how does our work relate with each other? How does it and there is a need for coordinated and concerted effort. How our work relates to each other is very important, because the kind of scale of change we're talking about is is huge. So there's a need for seeing all of our efforts coming together at different parts of the system, trying to push it into a different direction towards a different tomorrow, different kinds of outcomes. There is a Kumu map, which Karthik will show you shortly, which has this map which you can open, and it's an open source map. It also has some of the intervention points of ERA, current and some future thoughts on intervention points. And we're also coming out with a descriptive article on this map, which is already out on the ERA blog, and it will be shared across. So you can, I know this was a lot for a 45-minute talk, but you can unpack and read about all these loops in detail on the blog as well. That's it from my side. I'll give it to Karthik, who can take you through the Kumu map very briefly before Arjun can also step in and add on to what I've been presenting.
Everyone, I will show you the map in Kumu, with which you can interact and place your own interventions now.
Yes.
So the link to this map will be embedded in the article itself, which will be published in the blog of ERA. When you click on that link, you will be able to come to this website. Here on the left, you can see the description about the map and how to use the map and how to add your own interventions. Now I'll demonstrate how you can do it on your own. So to remove the left panel here, click on the three dots which are there in the middle of the screen. If you press on that, the left panel will go. And now you can recenter the systems map into the middle. Now, if you want to see the interventions very closely and what is written here, you can use the zoom option on the right top corner of the screen. If you press plus, you can go closer, and whatever Kabir has presented till now has been translated into this Kumu map. Right now, you can see all the loops he presented, like R1, R2, R3, and all here. One thing you can also do here is, if you hover over one of the variables, you will be able to see all the links that are connected to this particular variable. Suppose if you see if you hover over community rights, you can see that it is connected to conservation and preservation of existing ecosystems, and this particular intervention that is coming into community rights, and one from the top. One more thing you can understand is, like, we have presented a lot of loops. We need to understand which loop is what, like R1. What is R1? If you hover over R1, you will only see the R1 loop there, like industries and infra to government policies and government policies to industry and infra. If you hover over a different loop, like R14, you will see what R14 is. So these are some of the functionalities which will help you understand the map more easily. Right now, the one in the blue in the center is the CLD that is presented by Kabir. Now, if you want to see what are current interventions by ERA and what are planned interventions by ERA, there are these things, these buttons, which you could press to see what are what. So if you press on base, you will only see the CLD that Kabir has presented. If you want to see what are the current interventions, you can click on ERA current interventions. Then those interventions and the points of interventions will be shown here. For example, one of the current intervention is influencing policies to become ecologically sensitive, policy guidelines, tech support units in states, best practices per ecoregions, and leveraging existing policies. These are directly influencing the government policies favoring quick results. They are working towards reducing these policies. So like that, these are all the current interventions that are being done by ERA. Now, the next step is, if you want to see the planned interventions by ERA, you can press on the planned interventions button. Now you can see the variables in green, like strategy for engaging with new stakeholders. Like Kabir was saying, restoration visioning exercises, which are working on quick fix plantations, workshops for media, which are affecting the media reporting about plantations. So these are the three things which we have done till now. Now, we wanted to make this map to be interactive. So you could place your own interventions here. So I'll show you how you can place your own interventions here. To place own interventions here, first you need to create a free account in this Kumu website and sign in. Once you sign in, you will be able to see a green plus screen here, green plus button. If you press on it, you can click on add element. Suppose as this is for a test, I will name the element as test intervention. And I'll place it here. So the element is here now. Now I want this test intervention to affect some part of the system. For example, suppose I want to use or intervene in about restoration by livelihood organizations. I will again click on the green plus button and I will click on add connection. Here, as you have already clicked the variable, you have already got test intervention. Now, in the to element label, you will type restoration by livelihood organizations. When it will automatically prompt you about that. So when you click on it and press enter, you can see the connection being formed. Like this, we want you to make your own interventions and then show it, add it to the map here itself. Then we will categorize these interventions into this tab, individual and organizational interventions, where you will be able to see all the interventions you guys have added to the map. So this is the simple demonstration of Kumu. Now I'll give it back to Kabir.
Yeah, thanks, Karthik. So yeah, Arjun, if you also want to come in here, this Kumu map, as I was saying, we are all placed in the system. We are all influencing the system, and over time, we are hoping that this can become a living repository of how we are working in ecological restoration, how our work relates to each others, and develop a shared understanding of where we are as a group. Arjun, over to you.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Kabir and Karthik. I mean, it was just so nice to see the whole unpacking. And I think every time, I've probably seen this many times, but every time you see it, then there is something new that you think about. And I think that's what I find really fascinating about using this as an approach. I think what I really wanted to share with everyone is one of the biggest reasons to make this as an open map is what Kabir just pointed out, that we are all situated in this system. We are all working on different aspects. Some of the questions that I'm seeing also are about how do we initiate change if, for example, industries and infra is already such a mammoth kind of group to kind of deal with. How do we think about education? Plus, there's already this pressure about showing results. So then, how do we start engaging with that? And I think the answer sometimes I always find is, if, for example, there are multiple actors working on these different areas or points of intervention to influence different things, then we can always lean on each other and seek support and try and influence in better ways. When you look at this map, it's a very broad overview, but there's also so much more granular work that needs to happen. It needs to happen at a state level. It needs to happen at a stakeholder level. It needs to happen when we are talking about it as an exercise, whether it is for industries and so on, right? So there's a lot of granular work that needs to happen, and we are all working at different levels. We are either working very granularly or we are taking a very broad perspective. And I think something like this will be very useful for us to see who could be our allies. So the idea of this map eventually is that it will remain open source, it will remain publicly visible and available for anyone to add in the interventions. On our end, we will try and carry on making sure that the mapping continues more accurately. But that way, I think when, for example, you're looking for someone to support your work, or if it is, let's say, a workshop for journalists and you are looking for other people who have done this, you would know how to find who's done this and how that panned out, right? Or if you're looking for an intervention which is targeting more about coming up with new metrics and standards, I know there are quite a few people who are trying to figure out new ways of accounting for biodiversity. Right. So if people start putting out what are the areas of their work, it'll help everyone see what all is actually moving in the system and how do we really create sustained change. So that is the broad idea of having this open map. And I think that's it from me on this. But I'd really like to say thank you, Kabir and Karthik, for this. I know we are already at 5:10, but Karthik, Kabir, do you have some time for Q&A? Because there are already some. And I'll also be happy to take any if there is something.
Yes.
Um, The question is from Vinayak. So he says, Vinayak says, thank you for presenting this model. While it does seem quite comprehensive, I wonder if it is possible to incorporate so-called black swan events or factors that may not yet be on the model, which changes the entire model. Off the top of my head, I can think of climate tipping points reached due to climate chaos, which may make even ecological restoration limited in its success. Is there a way you can account for this? So, Kabir, I think that's a question that you could possibly help with.
So the objective, so in, I mean, when we're doing a system thinking exercise, the objective is never to have everything in the model. It's never to put everything into, feedback loops, capture everything. What we set out to do was to unpack why the trends are emerging the way they are emerging, what we have been seeing in the past 20, 25 years. The graphs I showed you, what are the reasons for that? And we use that understanding of the system to then think of what might happen in the future. Now, things like black swan events, by definition, we cannot, really put into any model. But any system responds to these kind of extreme events because of the feedback loops that are in the system, which are endogenous to the system. So you have a system with its feedback loops, and different kinds of shocks could impact different kinds of systems very differently. And you could have exogenous drivers coming into the system, like one system, like, for example, the same shock the same COVID virus impacted different people very differently because their internal systems are very different from each other. So external events like this, like a black swan event, is of course not really modelable. But if you are talking about thinking of the impacts it might have on the system, it can be done as an external factor, and we can deliberate what it might do. But by definition, of course, we don't exactly know what would happen in those cases. But the system's own structures will determine a lot of how it will respond to any kind of external shock, whether it is climate or anything else. That's a quick answer that I can go on. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I think the next question is from Viramani, and they ask, an important aspect of strengthening the ecological restoration loop is also by increasing awareness of policymakers and local stakeholders, which should be made a priority as well. That will really help generate awareness and understanding about ER and the long-term benefits it has towards the target. So yeah, I think that is more of a comment, but if you have anything else to add there, Kabir.
Absolutely. So we have, if you look at the loop as well, we do have that reinforcing loop R12. Let me see if I can share back my screen for a second.
Since you're going to R12 loop, Kabir, I think Viramani also followed up with R12 seems interchanged, where it seems that misinformed awareness and preference for quick fixes should be opposite, should be represented as opposite, and arrow between preference and funding should be similar. So if you could
Right.
also
So
see if there is that. Yeah.
So sometimes these polarities are a bit confusing to read. So what we have in R12 is, increased awareness about ecological restoration, leading to reduction in the misinformed awareness, which leads to reduction in the preference for quick plantations over restoration. So the S there also stands for if this variable goes down, then the effect variable also goes down. It's not just this goes up, but also if misinformed awareness goes down, then the preference for quick plantations over restoration would also go down, which would mean that the funding for restoration, ecological restoration, would go up. So it's an O, but it's opposite, because as this preference goes down, this funding will go up, which leads to more practitioners and organizations which can do ecological restoration, more ecological restoration, and more media reporting, leading to more awareness and even less misinformed awareness, leading to reduction in the preference. So this loop is, this overall awareness is overall in the society, which includes policymakers, which includes the private sector as well. It includes people at large who may not know about these unintended consequences and these long-term limitations of plantations and the ineffectiveness. So as this awareness in R12 becomes stronger and stronger, it would start impacting stakeholders of various types, including the policy stakeholders. But targeted interventions, working with the with those stakeholders in particular, must definitely are also definitely there. And if you see in the Kumu map, those are there in the current and future planned interventions. The idea is that the outcomes around ecological restoration is no one stakeholder's fault. We're all part of the system, and it is this. There's no one person to blame. It's rather the way this whole system is organized around these various loops is leading to these kind of outcomes. So we need to work with everyone in the system, including the people on this part of the system, because ultimately the long-term objective of climate change and land degradation impacts us all, and B1 and B2 in some sense do have a common some overlaps in their long-term goal. So the idea is to work with the policymakers and industry, private players, also creating a shared understanding around how ecological restoration in the long term might be the only effective way to meaningfully restore land and reverse any of these threats which we face. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Kabir. I think I'll just take it to the next question, and it also ties in to, I think, what Amrita is asking in later. But what the question is are the second and third order effects of B2, such as on water, biodiversity, disasters, not visible in this current system, and that also have opposite direction impacts? So, what are your views on that?
Yeah. So negative impacts of these plantations on those could be added to this loop. As I said, when we set out to make this loop, we were not aiming to capture everything. And any system thinking exercise should never tries to model the everything. That's a very important piece. It can be added to this loop. You can have the impacts coming here. What we were trying to do is unpack why the current trends in the system are happening and capture the bare minimum loops that are needed to unpack that. And once that is done, we drew our boundary on it. But for another purpose where we're talking about thinking about these unintended consequences of B2, and speaking and engaging with people, engaging with B2, we could tweak this map or do a slightly different, literally focused mapping, and we could add certain things here. They can also be added to this map, but no one map contains everything. So you'll always have things which will be left out, because the purpose of the map is to explain something, some part of the system, and no one map will have everything. But it can be easily brought in this map as well.
And I think I'll just quickly add here that even, through R16, you get this thing that when you look at succession and survival, and you actually look at what happens is that if you're looking at in B2, yes, the effects of water, biodiversity, disasters, there is quick results that are being visible, which is in terms of this green cover or the number of trees planted and so on. And these accounting of all these other metrics are not necessarily what the system is currently looking at in the starting. Right? So that also means that while there is a delay in the reduction of the green cover eventually because of the lack of survival, you don't really see that till many years have passed. So that time delay also doesn't really let the factors that we are focusing on is only looking at what does green cover look like. So I think that's also another reason why these other factors are not visible in the system.
Correct. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
I think there are a few more questions. So one is the next one is by Nishant, and they ask is in a field rampant with organizations doing quick fix plantations for industries who are also pressed for time using mix of natives and non-natives, which may not be species diverse or a mix which is not rooted in local ecology. How do you compete and educate industries about the importance of biodiversity, ecological restoration, and the right way of restoration?
Yeah. A key question. Yeah. Arjun, you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Nishad, I personally, I mean, I'm just saying from what I feel, and maybe others can chime in the chat or also add in how they're going about this, really. But I think, oftentimes we also pressed for these situations where the question usually is asked is, why can't we restore? Uh, why can't there be a lot more restoration much faster? And I think the thing to recognize oftentimes that is that, of course, degradation, it took a long time for this degradation to happen. And then there is this extreme pressure that is also coming in from these targets and from us, not really from uh, extreme pressure coming from these targets to meet these goals, which is where the quick fix plantations also come in. There's no real easy answer to say how do you compete and educate industries. I think it's just about if we can know who all are doing what where, and then what is the kind of support that can be provided. Maybe that's one way to start, is being able to kind of connect and share and be working on this simultaneously. So that could be possibly in simultaneously in different areas, different states. That is just a thought that I have, but maybe others on this call might have a better idea of how we could compete and educate industries about the importance of biodiversity. So I don't have a really clear answer yet for you on that, Nishant.
Yeah, I also think that even for the limited goals that these industries are claiming for, doing these quick fix plantations, those two, as we saw in the loop, are not going to be met. So if the plantation itself is not even successful in graduating, in becoming even a full grown plantation, you can't expect, even with the limited carbon tunnel vision, if they're looking at it, it's not going to sequester any of those carbon credits for which, it's not going to be actually sequestering the carbon for which they're getting carbon credits or other things. So even from that perspective, these plantations are probably not the most efficient way of doing things, and they're quite inefficient, in fact. So but there has to be creative thought put around how all this long term thinking can be distilled into short term kind of insights and short term time horizons which people have. uh, yeah, there are some ways to do it, but yeah, it'll take some thinking.
Okay, the next question is by Amrita, and Amrita asks a discussion says is a discussion I'd be interested to have. What if we rally behind biodiversity measurements for biodiversity credits, flawed as they are likely to be, to influence the quick fix plantation reinforcing loops, to bring attention and funding to more loops? That need resources like, especially for native species nurseries, just trying to think about existing knowledge that can be incentivized to be used and influence the simpler but erroneous loops. That's so would like to get your thoughts on this, but also maybe it could also be a larger conversation. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, in fact, one of the thoughts I presented was this idea around new measures and understandings of value, which could, which, apart from just addressing these climate policy and land degradation targets, ecological restoration has so many other benefits, like what you're mentioning in terms of biodiversity and ways of measuring those through biodiversity credits and other things. So new measures and understandings of value, which we can come up with various kinds of tokens of value could be thought of, which importantly should be valued by stakeholders sitting in the system, whether it is the private sector or farmers or whoever it is, so that they are able to make sense of that measure of value and act on it, so that it becomes an endogenous part of the system, and it leads to a lot more people wanting to maximize that value through ecological restoration. So I think there's a lot that can be done on those lines, and it is a longer discussion, but that's like, this loop was hinting towards exactly the kind of ideas that are there in this question. Thank you for that.
Okay. So I think we have three questions, and I think after that we can close the call. So I think one is, this is an input really. So this is Dr. EVR Raju. My input for the Kumu map, I think you should include biodiversity parameters and food chains establishment. I, along with my team at Jharia Coal Mindshare, have done extensive eco-restoration on degraded mined out lands, where the final target was biodiversity rejuvenation and food chain reestablishment. So I think I can quickly take this as Dr. EVR Raju, thank you for sharing that. And I think while we'll make a note of this on the webinar, we'd definitely like this to be also added into the Your Interventions section of the map. And that way we'll also know who all are working, what is the kind of work that you're doing there and where these interventions are targeted. So I think that will be a very useful one to have there. Kabir, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
No, Arjun, I think, yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. That covers it.
And oops, I think I by mistake answered another question. So I think Saryu also asked the same thing. We have had great success with removal of invasives. How do we share this with fellow practitioners? So again, I think for Saryu, can I quickly take that and say that, Saryu, for one, in terms of the Kumu map, you can always add it into maybe the place where we're talking about knowledge about knowledge about ecological restoration, or even in terms of, in the ecological restoration point. So you can always add these interventions there. And that will be one way for others to also know that this is the kind of work that you're doing. And in terms of sharing outside of that in different capacities, then we can try and figure what that would mean. Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to go back to, so I think, sorry, that will be that for now. And of course, please feel free to add it into the Kumu map. And if there is other means that you'd want to share, then we can figure that and what the modalities could be. There's one question on the chat, which was, could local communities be considered responsible for, sorry, I think I missed another, yeah. So there were two questions on chat. Okay. One is, could local communities be considered responsible for some level of degradation through grazing pressures? Or does the frequency of observation show that such is mostly not the case in the overall influencing factors? If there are, is there any language around this that can be communicated with entities like CSR funds to pitch as community interventions for fodder, as many CSR don't cover forest cover restoration as a target. And I think this also ties in with Gautam's question, which has come towards the end, um, which is about, have we considered unintended consequences for and the note aside with that is for communities in particular.
Right. So yeah, let me answer that second one first. So yeah, in the map we do have unintended consequences. Yeah. So yeah, Gautam. So we have in the map mapped out, especially the paradigm of these quick fix plantations and wanting to have quick results does lead to a lot of negative consequences on community participation, community rights, which is also actually a big factor why the succession and survival of these plantations doesn't happen. So that part we have captured, and to some extent, doing ecological restoration the right way doesn't means also, of course, doing it in a scientific way and using the scientific protocol and choosing the species correctly. It does also mean doing it with the community, doing it with engaging with the community, so that some of the the unintended consequences which are taking place as a result of B2 don't happen as a result of B1. And that's where coupling with these restoration adjacent organizations and the work that they are doing, and increasing the engagement with the community could ensure that this loop turns out very differently for these in terms of these unintended consequences on the community, as well as gives some pushback to the unintended consequences which are underway as a result of this dominant juggernaut which we have. So definitely doing restoration in with the community's involvement in a big way. I think is a big part of doing B1, I would say. So that part has been, we had some discussion around that.
And
And I, yeah, go ahead, Arjun.
yeah, and I think,
Yeah,
sorry, Kabir,
no,
please go
I was
ahead.
just thinking, and I believe ERA is also thinking of ways and means of reaching out to these adjacent organizations and expanding
Yes.
the work in that direction. But yeah, Arjun.
Yes, and I think that is one thing that has been coming up now a lot, is that we are seeing there is an increase number of communities with the help of development organizations or livelihood organizations who are securing CFR for communities. And then the next step, of course, is if we have to what does restoration mean for the community from a community perspective, and what are the other needs that have to be met through restoration as also needs to be taken into account. So I think that is something that is now growing as a requirement, and that is something that we will have to figure out. Of course, the other part of this question was also, is there any way to think about community interventions for fodder as such? I think what would be really not, that was a question that was on the chat, is that could local communities be considered responsible for some level of degradation? Um, I think there are so many different factors that come into degradation, and yes, one part of it could be grazing pressures. But what will be really interesting to see is what are the kind of interventions that we are seeing that reduces grazing pressures and allows for restoration at the same time. And I think an example of that had come up in one of the webinars where Kedar Gore had presented from the Corbett Foundation, talking about how they started a program for stall feeding, which reduced overgrazing in the forest areas where the reserve forest areas where communities used to earlier go for grazing. So I think those were some. So maybe that is another thing to think about, is what are the kind of interventions that are already there? And if we can show these use cases and pitch these use cases further out to, like you pointed out, CSR funders or others, then it might again, become a more dominant, that it might help in getting more funding for alternatives to alternative methods for fodder. Right. So I think that could be one of the other ways. So if we start adding, this is another thing that can happen. And I think the last question, and I think we should close after that, is so this is from Rakshita. Rakshita says, thank you for a very interesting and insightful presentation. It is a practice that many in the development sector working on facilitating the successful implementation of rights-based legislation must learn about too. My question is, how do we account for the differences within the community? When you enable democratic decision-making within stakeholders, the deliberation can reflect competing interests. For instance, land owning communities will want something very different than landless PNTs, for instance. And how do tools such as these Kumu maps reflect the dynamism, or is it similar to what Kabir mentioned about everything not being able to be incorporated? So, yeah, I think, Kabir, I will leave this to you, but maybe even talking about, you could also, what you were talking about in terms of systems modeling that you have done previously for other instances, and how that has panned out might be a useful pointer as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Akshita. That's important point. We didn't. I mean, it's not featuring in this map because I mean, we were, as I said, trying to capture these dominant forces which are shaped ecological restoration's trajectory. When we do systems thinking, and when we want systems thinking to be useful at the community level, you're absolutely right. There are huge differences within the community, and we sometimes we have to do these. I mean, if you're doing participatory workshops with the community, we do sometimes we have to do it with different sections of the community separately. They won't come together, so that we have their perspectives in the model or in the map that we are developing. So we have to make sure, I mean, when we're when we're doing some kind of systems thinking for community, like we did a project in the Bunny grasslands with A-Tree, where we were working on a community which, I mean, the community has, it's a pastoral community. A lot of them are dependent on grassland, while there is an invasive species, and a lot of other people who don't have livestock are dependent on the invasive species for their livelihood. Now, when you talk about grassland restoration, you are causing unintended consequences to the livelihoods of people who are dependent on the invasive species, while the people who have, in that case, not land, but the other asset there is livestock, they benefit from that much more. So we had to do workshops across with different sections of the community, and the modeling we did, it showed up these unintended consequences as, loss of income over time. And then we have to think of, if we're talking about ecological restoration for that landscape, um, what does it mean? And it should be looking at the social ecological system as one, not as just the ecological system, but then you have to think of compensatory livelihoods for other communities who are dependent on other parts of the ecosystem. How fast, how soon do livelihoods have to be thought of for them? And then you have to get that perspective also into the systems thinking, and that is the job of the systems thinking practitioner, and the kind of group settings which we do it through. You have to make an effort to engage with the different sections of society, especially if you're doing it in a country like India. So we do make an effort to get those perspectives in, especially when we're doing a community-based project. In this case, we are looking at more high-level emergent trends in ecological restoration. So we did not go into that piece, but it's a very important point when we are doing work on that scale.
And with that, I think we can, it's almost 5:30, and I would like to say, yes, Saryu, I think, thank you for that. I'm going to say thank you to Kabir and Karthik and the rest of the DESTA team who helped us with this exercise. I think Kabir and Karthik were there, then there was also Mihir and Swati, and they helped us with this exercise to make the system modeling, to make the systems map. So thank you so much for coming here and sharing this, and I hope you had a great time on this, but we definitely had a lot to learn from you, and this was really an insightful exercise, and I hope this is as useful for the rest of the community as well. So thank you so much, and thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot, Arjun. Yeah, we really
Yeah.
enjoyed working on this whole piece with you and the ERA. So absolute pleasure to work with you and to do this webinar. Thank you.